Well, today finds me on a section of the Appalachian Trail in northwest Connecticut that goes right by some very scenic areas. And yes, there's a lot of scenic views in northwest Connecticut on the Appalachian Trail. Today we're going to be spending a little time at a lower elevation and looking at one pretty famous view called Rand's View, which is a overlook on a meadow. I've never actually been to it. I've hiked a lot of the Appalachian Trail in this area, but not this particular section. We're also going to be looking at what's called the Great Falls of the Housatonic River, which is a large waterfall that normally doesn't have a lot of water because it's diverted for power generation. Well, they're working on the generating station this week, so all the water, all 850 cubic feet per second of that waterfall, or of this river, is coming over the falls. I wasn't sure if there would be any water coming over the falls today, but I'm fortunate that there is, and it should be quite a sight to see. It falls over 50 feet over a ledge of marble that actually forms the valley of this Housatonic River, at least in this area. And I'm going to start calling these hikes on the Appalachian Trail and other long distance trails, I'm going to start calling them samplers. So if you ever buy a box of candies, you get the sampler box and then you get the full box sometimes. In this case, we're going to be doing, maybe 5-6 miles today round trip, and sampling a piece of the Appalachian Trail in Connecticut. I've also got some other long distance trails in southern New England and upstate New York that I'm going to try to sample in the next couple of years to keep new ideas for this channel going. There's a lot of places that people don't always know about that are very scenic, and you drive right by them on the way to the areas that are very famous, so I often try to look for those. That brick building in the background there is the power generating station here in Falls Village, Connecticut. The name of the town is Falls Village because of the Great Falls of the Housatonic River. I'm going to make quite a few video clips on the part of the Appalachian Trail here that follows the river for about a mile here, and then heads up what's called Mount Prospect to Rand's View, R-A-N-D-S View. And we'll take as many good videos as we can, but I think this falls is going to be quite interesting with a lot of water coming down it today. And as we follow the river, we'll get closer to the falls in just a minute here. Boy, this is a pretty good sign if you're a thru hiker. This is early September. Most of them are long through this area. If they want to make the 2,100 miles going northbound to Mount Katahdin, they need to get through this area and up there by October to avoid severe winter weather in the White Mountains and Longfellow Mountains of Maine, White Mountains in New Hampshire. So yes, 1,500 miles. Hiked up here in August a lot and seen through hikers, and even in July. So they're at 1,500 miles from the southern terminus of the Appalachian Trail. You got about 600 miles to go. Just happens to be right on this stretch by the Great Falls of the Housatonic River. And plenty well-trodden fisherman trails get you to the really scenic areas along this stretch of the Appalachian Trail. So I'm actually off the trail just a couple hundred feet here, but there's a smaller waterfall right here that by itself is quite interesting. Maybe 8 or 10 feet of sloping ledge here. They say this is runnable in kayaks and rafts. Sometimes it's what you can't see that's the most dangerous part of the river, where you get a sloping ledge or a straight waterfall and it just all disappears with no signs of it. That's where the most trouble usually is. This looks like it actually keeps moving, so a lot of the energy of this waterfall keeps going, it would be less likely to pin you underneath an undercut rock. That being said, I wouldn't assume anything with a river like this, because what you can't see is the most dangerous part. And right over there is where the trouble would be, where you see that big boil. Those big boils are where the water really undercuts the ledges. So what looks like a sloping ledge could have a big keeper hydraulic underneath it. I leave rafting and kayaking like this for the people that know the rivers very well. Personally, I would never try a river like this on my own without somebody that knows exactly which part of the river to take your boat down. But this is about an 8 or 10 foot drop here, and the bigger drop is just up the trail. Alrighty, we've come about a quarter mile above that last sloping ledge. That's a class 4 rapid there. I just looked it up. So treat it as such if you're into whitewater sports. And obviously the falls themselves would be unrunnable. So we got plenty more sloping ledge right here. This is all marble through here. Marble normally doesn't make waterfalls because it erodes so easily, but a lot of this area, the stream channels are pretty new. The valley has been here a long time, but the stream channels are pretty new because after the ice melted between 10 and 15,000 years ago, a lot of the older channels were full of rocks and gravel, and the streams were searching for new ways to the ocean and haven't quite finished the job of cutting away this softer rock. So here's the Great Falls of the Housatonic. It drops, it says 50 feet. Boy, it looks like more than that to me. It is gushing with water. And from what I read, they usually divert 1,500 CFS through the power plant. So I wasn't expecting any water today with an 850 CFS gauge reading upstream from here. But because they're working on the power plant, it's all coming over the falls. We're still about maybe an 1/8 of a mile away. I'll try to make some better, closer videos as we get close. I may not be able to talk when I'm there because of the roar of the falls. But this is an amazing place. There's a canoe launch at the top of the falls where you can paddle upstream on basically what's a lake for a few miles. And there's also a canoe launch below that class 4 rapid about a half mile downstream from here where it's easier rapids, but not for novices. It's more like class 2, even class 3. But this stretch through here from the bottom of the falls to that class 4 sloping ledge is for experts only. And plenty of fisherman trails come off the Appalachian Trail just a few hundred feet right down to the riverbank. They're pretty steep, so you wouldn't want to do it if you're fully loaded backpacker. Leave your pack off next to the trail and scramble your way down here. But boy, we're getting really close to the bottom of the falls now. Plenty of rapids below the falls. The falls themselves. And this is about as close as I can get to the bottom of the falls. What's on the left-hand side of the screen here is all sloping marble ledge. Marble doesn't have a lot of grit in it, so it tends to be a little slippery when wet. And with all the spray from the falls, They would always be wet, at least when the falls are running. We'll get a couple more views of this falls from the mid levels and from the top. And then we got about an 800-foot vertical climb and about 1.5 miles up what's called Mount Prospect. And then shortly after the summit of Mount Prospect is what's called Rand's View. And some of the mountains were in the clouds this morning, but it is supposed to clear out today, so hopefully we will get the view that we will get a good view from Rand's View. We'll have to see what happens here. And those that are backpacking this stretch of trail, you don't have to take the fisherman trails to get a great view of the falls. This fenced-in area here just above me has a great view from about midway up the falls. And then more fisherman trails to get a little closer. And boy, the roar of the falls yields to a very, very quiet stretch of the Appalachian Trail, especially in September on a weekday when the thru hikers are all the way up in New Hampshire and Maine by now. Most of them start in March, some start in February, with the goal of making it to Mount Katahdin before the weather gets too cold. Well, this whole valley is marble. Even up on the hillsides is marble, and with lots of marble you get lots of Christmas fern. This is entirely Christmas fern on these slopes here. It's quite dominant. And in the wintertime, this year's growth will stay green. Sometimes it lays down, but it doesn't actually turn brown until next year's growth unfurls in May. The woods are often quiet in September, the days it's not storming. The birds are done singing. The crickets tend to chirp in the evening and overnight. The cicadas have come and gone. And the woods are just a very quiet feel. And it's unsustainable because within a few weeks the colors change, the weather gets windier and noisier again, and the crunch of the leaves under your feet in October, late September. But early to mid-September is a great time to hike, and the woods can be it's a different feel. It's interesting in its own way and different in its own way. One word of caution though, the bees are very active in September. So if you're hiking in a group, if one person spots bees, everybody else should just either freeze or turn around, because those bees will come after not the first hiker in the group, but usually the third or fourth once they get agitated. Well, the ascent up Prospect Mountain is about 900 feet from where I parked at the canoe launch below the Great Falls of the Housatonic, and it's about 800 feet higher than the top of the falls. And never is this trail steep or extremely rocky. It has a little bit of sloping ledge in places, but nothing too technical. You don't need your hands. And the summit of Prospect Mountain is still almost 1,000 feet lower than some of the taller mountains along this stretch of trail. They do have an intentional clearing here looking north and northeast. And the Rand's view is coming up soon, and that should have an even better view in that direction. Let's just take a look though. So we're looking up the valley of the Housatonic River, which is the softer marble erodes into a valley, and the harder rocks on either side, like Canaan Mountain to our northeast here, stick up quite a bit higher. That Canaan Mountain is state forest land. Not a lot of official trails from what I can tell. As you can see, lots of ledges. So it could be an interesting place to explore off trail. I almost exclusively do that type of hiking in the second half of the fall when the bees are gone and humidity is lower, and there are timber rattlesnakes in this area. They tend not to hang out in places where people hang out, but those southwest facing ledges would be their preferred place to hang out. So I'm going to consider trying that sometime, maybe not this fall, but sometime in the future. And there are some unofficial trails and some horse trails that go up the north side of that mountain, and from there on I'd have to see what's really up there. I don't mind bushwhacking. I've done it many times down in Kentucky when I was living in the Ohio Valley. And down there I definitely waited till November, December to do that for a lot of reasons, including the high humidity and high population of copperhead snakes in the Appalachian foothills of the Ohio Valley. They're really hard to see and are not aggressive, but you can't see them at all because of the way they blend in. But around here it's pretty much just timber rattlers. They're big, they're lethargic, they tend to sit on rocks to stay warm, except in the hotter weather. And if you avoid those areas, even along the Appalachian Trail, you're probably not going to see one. And it's 2.1 miles from the top of the Great Falls of the Housatonic River to Rand's View. And it is 2.6 miles from the bottom of the falls by that bridge where I started this recording. There's actually a canoe launch just below that bridge. Looking at some maple leaf viburnum here. It gets these little berries on it. Sometimes there's a lot more than that. Sure looks like a red maple though, doesn't it? I'm doing a little work on red maple summer and fall appearance on my other channel. That'll be coming out probably in October, early November. Looking at some trees that resemble red maple. And surprisingly, there isn't a lot of red maple on this mountain, but mostly sugar maple. And a little bit of this goosefoot maple, or as they call it, stripe maple. Well, this view is quite unique. I've seen the view from the tops of the mountains that are going to show up in the view here in a minute. Bear Mountain, Race Mountain, Mount Everett. Those are great views, but this is unique because we're actually looking up at the mountains and not down from them. And we're looking north towards Massachusetts, and the broad valley of the Housatonic River. That valley exists not just because the river's there, but also because it's marble and bedrock, and it erodes quicker than the schists that form the mountains to the east and west of it, and the gneisses and some of the other intrusive rocks, some granites. So this is a huge meadow here. Rand's View is a huge meadow. They must cut it for hay, or at least cut it for something, because it is pretty short grass. Looks like it's been mowed at least once this summer. I would guess that this would be good for hay. And there aren't too many places in the Appalachian Mountains where the trail comes down to a meadow, at least in the parts I've hiked. A lot of times it stays on the ridges or is in very rocky areas that could not be cut for hay or farmed easily. So what a great view. I'd say about a 2-hour hike up here, but I spent longer than that because I was at the falls for over an hour going down all those little fisherman trails. But let's take a look at some of the mountain ranges here and name them off. To my northwest, this Appalachian Trail continues up to about 2,300 foot elevation, and that's Bear Mountain right in the center of your screen there. From there, it follows the Housatonic Range. That's the name of this geological feature to our west here. And the next mountain is Race Mountain, which is in the center of the screen. And right next to it, a little higher, is Mount Everett with that dome shape. And then a very steep east face that's partly in the shadow of those clouds. So the trail follows that Housatonic Range from Bear Mountain down in the Sagers Ravine, up over Race Mountain and Mount Everett to a place called Jug End, which is out of view from here, and then crosses the Housatonic Valley over towards the area around Tyringham. So I've done pieces of that trail over the years. Pretty much now my time restrictions are long day hikes and not overnight backpacking. Right in the center of your screen is the area around West Stockbridge, Massachusetts, and Stockbridge, Massachusetts, home of Norman Rockwell and the Norman Rockwell Museum. And this entire area is inspirational to landscape artists because of the natural beauty. I think that pointy mountain, it's not the highest, but also very pointy, is Monument Mountain, which has a lot of views from the quartzite cliffs up by West Stockbridge and Stockbridge area. So 2.6 miles out, 2.6 back, and my time is limited. I'll just stop recording at this point and do the hike back. But an easy half-day hike, and if you're fortunate enough to catch the Housatonic River when it's really full, you can see the falls like I saw them, or if they're not diverting water across the through the hydro plant, you can see them as I saw them today. But it takes a lot of water to fill up those falls normally. I was lucky today, and I'm thankful for that opportunity. And we'll keep recording these adventures and hidden waterfalls and hidden hikes as the fall and early winter continue.